Hello and welcome to this edition of Extension Ed Talks. I'm Erin Petersilie, the Family and Consumer Science Agent from the Walnut Creek District.
And I'm Anna Schremmer, the Family Consumer Science Agent from the Phillips District.
And today we are talking about how to clean and service and do the basics for when you get maybe that first sewing machine, or we have a lot of schools that are going to those maker spaces and having those sewing machines where we can do some of those. So how do we take care of a sewing machine, whether we're using it at school or maybe we've been gifted one or we've found one and really interested in using it in our home?
You know, that is a problem that sometimes we get to sewing and we forget one of the most important things, sort of like your car. You forget to check the oil. Well, here, maybe you forget to oil your machine and clean it out. And that's one of the things as a new 4-H'er that is learning to sew, you need to plan on doing that regularly. I have kind of a rule that as soon as you get done with the project, that you brush your machine out, you oil it, get it ready for the next project.
Yes, the project is not done until the sewing machine is taken care of. And we need to think about this as a machine. Just like you mentioned the car, any sort of home maintenance, this is a machine. And we can get a lot of dollars wrapped up into these, but you know, when taken care of correctly, these can last a lifetime. They truly can. I mean, there's some sewing machines out there that, I mean, I've used that have been around for a while.
Exactly. You can tell the difference in our ages. I have an older sewing machine and I've had it for, I'm not going to say how many years, just a few years. No, probably about 30 years or more, 40. I have one that I got that I bought when I got right out of college, and I still use it, and I got this one maybe 10, 15 years later. And so it's my favorite. I would not, you know, I would like to get a new one, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, as I said, you're going to have some things on your wish list here.
Yes. So we're going to get started with actually what you need to do to clean and get your machine ready for your next project. The first thing you need to do, of course, is to remove your thread. And you just make sure that you take your thread out of the machine, and somehow it's caught up here. Usually it just pulls right through. And so you want to take your upper thread off. And different machines are, all of them have different oil places and that you can get to. Mine has, and we'll see if we can get a shot here, of 3 red oil spots. Some of them they aren't red, but they have little holes, and in your instruction booklet it should tell you where they are.
Yes, so always read instructions. You know, you've probably been told that a lot in your life. And if you look over here, my machine is much newer. This is something I think I've had probably about 5 years, and I don't have any of those. In fact, I have no open spot at the top for oiling my machine. And if you get into my instruction booklet, it will talk about some of that oiling and some of that maintenance as well. If you are handed a machine, or maybe it's handed down, going online is an easy way to find a lot of those instruction booklets. And in fact, a lot of the new machines don't necessarily even have them, or they're very basic in their instruction, and it tells you the how to care for is maybe taken care of online for you. So there are some different options because they aren't going to all work the same. I mean, this is just a very simple difference here on top.
Correct. Yes, and reading that instruction booklet is very, very important. Sometimes your instruction booklet will actually tell you you can take the top off, but normally that may only need to be done once or twice a year. If you're sewing with a lot of fuzzy fabrics, a lot of fabrics that have lint, now that may need to be done more often. But just the general getting ready for the next project, you wouldn't need to take the top off, the bottom off, and everything completely out, because you can do that, you know, just keeping this clean as you go. You don't have to do that really deep maintenance very often. So we've got the thread off the top. Now we're going to work at getting the thread, the bobbin out. And this is backwards. Normally I'm looking at my machine, but we'll try to get this straight so I know what I'm doing here. But take your bobbin out. My bobbin's a little different. There's 3 ways your bobbin can be. You can have one that's up front and have a bobbin case, and you take the bobbin case out and to clean it, and we'll have some pictures on that. Mine has the bobbin in the back, and it has a little spring that helps you get that bobbin out.
And I was gonna say, it's very different. I've never worked on a machine that had it quite like that. And then my bobbin has it up front with this, and if I turn mine around, I just have a clear cover on this, and it just has a little piece that we snap off and pull that. So just a little clear piece that covers this. This is the throat plate when we're talking about that on the machine, or something mentions, look at that throat plate, that's where we're looking at there. And then the bobbin comes out from there. So it still sets in very much like Anna's does, but there's two different ways for us to bring those out.
So once you have that done, then you need to take your presser foot off, and there's a variety of different ways. You need to, if you don't know how your presser foot comes off from your machine, and I need to put my glasses on here. I have a little screw. Some of them just pop off.
Right.
And mine screws, and then you want to take that presser foot off.
Okay, so she's talking about a screw, and hers is coming off. Mine will actually come off two different ways. Mine has this set screw here as well, but it also has a lever on the back that will drop just the bottom portion of the presser foot. And so then this shaft that then comes on up, you can take it off if you're needing that space, or it can be left on if you can get in there. And so yeah, these feet just pop off. So sometimes when you get along sewing and you don't realize that that's what happens, you think, oh, I've broken my sewing machine. Just check to see how it goes on, because a lot of these are just spring and they just pop on and off.
And then you need to take out your needle. Most needles go in all the same direction, and we'll talk about the needle later on in the program, but you just loosen your needle, the screw, and let it and pull it out. You might want to see how it is in there, if the flat part of it is to the back or if it's to the side. Just so maybe later on it should also tell you in your instruction booklet how it goes back in. So take your needle out and just lay that to the side.
I'm going to interrupt you. This
okay.
is where little tools work very well. You saw that I was struggling getting that. It was more than just finger tight. A lot of times, depending on what I'm working with in terms of fabric and the thickness, or if you're working on a plastic table that has lots of bounce to it, or if I'm embroidering, that needle will come loose on me, and sometimes it breaks, and sometimes it's just a matter of just needing to pop it back in there and making sure I have a good set screw there.
Right. You want to take your throat plate off. That's what goes around your feed dogs. If you don't know these terms and you read them in your instruction booklet, the throat plate goes around your feed dogs, and the feed dogs is what takes your material through your machine, so you don't have to push or pull it. It does the work for you. But it's important to get that off so you can get down in there with a brush and get the lint out. Now, this kind of brings me to cleaning equipment. There's not a lot for it. Erin already showed you a screwdriver. There's several different kinds. This little screwdriver I got at a hardware store. They're not very expensive, but they're wonderful, because if you try to get a tall screwdriver, it may not fit underneath. So it's really nice to have a short, stubby screwdriver. Also, usually what comes with your machine in its accessories box is a tiny one, and those you need to have also, because there's a lot of small screws that you may have to use or to adjust. Okay, once you have your throat plate off.
Yeah, mine doesn't want to come. There we go. Okay.
A lot of them are magnetic, and some of mine, this one clips in, but I've had some at school that were magnetic, and sometimes they're really hard to get off.
This one, it just has that piece that will go in there, and this is where Anna's going to make us do a little confession of how long it's been. How many projects have you done since your sewing machine has been?
Well, that's sort of mine too. I just made a baby quilt that was the minky material, so yes. I kind of hate to think what is in here, but yes. And another accessory is a nice brush, and only use this brush for your machine. Don't go planning on using it anywhere else. I have always told my family that what's with my machine, my sewing scissors, everything stays with this machine. It does not go to cut toenails
No.
or to brush out hair or anything else. It stays with this machine. It has a purpose for that.
Yes. And it's in our house, I mean, yes, all these sort of things have to stay with my machine, but it's my sewing scissors. I swear, if you need a piece of paper cut and you grab my sewing scissors, no, there are consequences going to happen in that
Those things
household.
can dull those scissors
Yes.
faster than anything else. And yes, I have rescued my scissors many a time. So now it's kind of nice that I don't have to worry about that.
Her kids are grown and out of the house.
Yes, and
but both of mine are sewing, so they understand the value of a good pair of scissors.
so and this is a very, very valuable accessory. I also have a pair of old tweezers because there's times that your hands just can't get where it needs to get, and especially if you have a serger. And we're not showing a serger today, but sometimes you need those to thread all the little places. And sometimes these are really good to get something out that you just can't reach any other way. So they're really helpful. And you can purchase sewing ones, or you can just use an old pair that you have in your drawer, and that's what I have. Another accessories I really like, and this is because as you get older, your eyesight gets worse, and I even find that light helps tremendously. So I just have gotten, it's not an expensive flashlight, but it's something that sometimes, I hate to admit this, but I have put it in my mouth and used my hands. So you don't want something too big. Or you can get some that will just, you can have the little neck that screws down, and those are a little more expensive. So I use this a lot, and one of these times I will invest in one of those other lights. But yes, this does work to get in there so you can see what it is you've missed or what you need to change and oil. So I wouldn't recommend putting them in your mouth, but sometimes you know, that's something that you might want to,
You have to find what works for you.
Exactly. So, and that's about all. Well, another thing, you need the oil. And there's a lot of different kinds of oil. There is one kind of oil you do not want to use, and that's your 3-in-1 oil. Those are for machines, not sewing machines. And there's a lot of different brands you can get. I would recommend that you go to a sewing store or get online and Google sewing machine oil. I got mine from the repairman that we had come to the school. And the thing I like about this one is it has a neck that can come up, and you can get in places that possibly you couldn't get otherwise. So, you know, it's very handy. And Erin has hers.
I was gonna say, so mine's just a little bit different. That, yes, it'd be nice to have that neck, but the biggest thing on both of these is that they have a very, very small hole. We're not talking about this is going to use a lot of oil. And I know you're looking at our bottles going, those are really big bottles. This is going to last years. Or when you know, I'm sewing with 20 kids, maybe it goes a little bit quicker. But having that very small hole, so you can very precisely put it in where it is that you need it to go.
Yes, and there's usually an oiler that comes with your machine if it's a brand new one, and it is one that you are to oil. If you do get a computer machine, many of those say do not oil, that you need to take them in to the dealer and they will clean it and oil it. In fact, you can't even get into those. I've had some that come to my classes and they say, well, how do I oil? Well, you're not supposed to oil those because they have, you need to have the dealer do that because it has the computer screen on there, and I personally would not want to touch that anyway.
And that's where she gets a little bit here tonight. You know, mine does have some of those computer features to it, and that's why we can't do that oiling up above here. So about the only place that I truly can oil is then down here in the bobbin, and then over here with my thread take up.
Okay, where you're going to be cleaning probably the most and spending a lot of time, because this is where it gets the dirtiest, is underneath your presser foot and your feed dogs. Now you can see I'm getting a lot of lint out of there because, like I said, the last thing I just made was a minky baby quilt, and so there is a lot of fuzz. Some people have asked me, can I use an air can? And no, you can't, not in these. Now, if you had the type of bobbin that you could take out and you could spray to get some of that lint out, would work. But what happens is if you spray and use a air can in here, it takes all that lint and throws it in here, back behind. And what that happens then is it gets in the gears that are turning underneath here, and it will just
it's just plugging them up.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for. So, but you need to take and get all that out that you can. Usually your tweezers and pull those out, get all that out as clean as you can. And then you can take a soft cloth, rub the top, get all the dust and all the lint off of there. Just wipe it down, because you'll be surprised where lint and sometimes oil. Now I just am using a soft cloth here to make sure it gets all the oil off, and that way it won't get on the material that you're using, and that's the old, and sometimes you'll see that it's actually black. Now with mine, as I already told you, I have 3 red oil holes here, and I have a red here. Most of the time, and I also have another red oil hole here. Mine's marked, sometimes they're not, but generally if it's a moving part, it's going to need to be oiled.
Okay, so with that, we're going to take a short break, and we'll come back to needles and some tension and other parts of our machine that we need to make sure that we have working properly so that our sewing machines work properly, and come back with us after the break.
Hi.
We're looking for insurance.
Oh, let's see who's free.
When insurance agents work for only one company, their options are simply limited. But a trusted choice independent agent is free to shop many companies for a better deal. Free to do what's right for you.
Let us shop for you. Contact Rogers & Associate to learn more.
What a girl wants in her home kitchen. Ease of use, flexibility, fun, the latest kitchen design, Frigidaire Professional Real Stainless Steel for fewer finger smudges, a French door refrigerator, convection cooking, a quiet dishwasher. Have the staff at Genuine Appliance in Hayes demonstrate new Frigidaire Professional appliances to find what you want. Genuine Appliance at 1224 East 27th in Hayes. Everything a girl wants.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Extension Ed Talks. And Anna Schremmer and I are working on our sewing machines and inviting those of you, the youth, as well as anybody who sews, is to really making sure that they're taking care of their sewing machines, treating this as a machine just like we would our car, and making sure that we are oiled. And now that we have our machines oiled, we're ready to put them back together and do some testing.
Correct. We've kind of already did a little bit of that. I put my throat plate over my feed dogs. I got that snapped into place. But we're kind of ready to go ahead and thread your machine. Now before you do that, when you freshly oil, take that cloth again and go over the spots where you oiled, so that if there's any oil residue left, then it's gone. The first thing I always do is I put my bobbin in. Now if you have not done the bobbins before, make sure that you look in your instruction booklet. Mine is one that just drops in with the holes on top. So the bottom of my bobbin doesn't have any holes. So it makes it very simple. And it just drops in. It goes, you follow and goes around, and it hooks in, hook and over the top. And then I can close it because it leaves a little groove for it there. Now the next thing you'll want to do, and this might be a good time to talk about needles. We have a lot of different needles.
I was going to say, let me grab our needles for just a second.
If you notice, the needles have a flat part and they have a rounded part, and in the front of your needle should be a little groove that goes up to that rounded part. Now that little groove should go, should face to the front for my machine. Now some of them, if you have a side one, it will tell you whether the flat side needs to go to the back and the little groove goes to the left or the right. Mine goes to the back. And so when you do that, you put it in, and see if I can find the little hole here. Well,
Okay, so while she's doing that and we're talking about needles, there's a lot of different needles in terms of what your project is. So if you are sewing with knits, you're going to need a different type of needle than you are if you are sewing with jean material. And a lot of these, I mean, Schmidt's or Singer, you can have all, and a lot of them tell you whether or not it's a universal needle. This one says that it's universal. It also gives you some sizes and some weights, and they've got some great cheat sheets online as to what you need. I have some old Singer ones from my grandmother that were handed down to me, and these packages even gave you examples of exactly what it was that you were looking for. And Singer did a lot more in terms of color coding their bands and things, so that if you learn their color codes, then you knew what type of needle it was for you to be able to do that.
There's a little bit more about the needles. There's American and a European system. The American system goes from 8 to 19. The European goes from 60 to 120. Now 60 or 8 and 60, and you'll often see this together on your packets. Those are for sewing with very fine, it's a fine needle. And so when you are sewing something like sheer material, you should use a number 8 or 60. And if you're sewing with upholstery material, you want to go all the way up to 19 or 120. So that kind of gives you a guide. And there's guides around, but just remember, generally I sew with 12 because that's kind of medium weight, and when I do a lot of sewing, that's what my material is. Now, one other thing, when I was putting in my needle, I forgot to mention, you want to make sure it goes as far up as you can get, and if something is not sewing right, your tension's wrong, it's usually because your needle's in wrong. So you may want to take it out and adjust it.
Okay, so as we're looking through this, making sure, as we talk about tension as well, and tension is how tight that thread is and how it's pulling in there from both the top and the bottom. And a lot of times when we talk about something not going well, look at your bobbin. Is it wound correctly? Sometimes I sew with a lot of 4-Hers, and sometimes the bobbin just didn't get wound tight enough. It's just really loose on here. So that's something that we need to look at. But maybe it's not dropped in correctly, or especially if you have a bobbin casing, there's definitely a very specific way that that goes in. And so making sure that our bobbin is there and our needle is there probably solves 90% of the problems that we're going to see.
Those are when somebody, a lot of my students or somebody comes in and brings their sewing machine and it's not working, the first thing I do is I check the needle if it's in correctly and if the bobbin has been put in correctly. And sometimes just readjusting them. The next thing I already have done, I put my presser foot back on, my needle's on, my presser foot's back in, I have my bobbin in, and then it comes to threading.
So threading sewing machines, they have a very basic, they have some similarities, I guess is the best thing to do. But every sewing machine is going to look a little bit differently. And if you're watching Anna thread hers, you know, we kind of talk about down and ups and thread guides and all those sort of things. All machines are going to have some of those similarities, but everything's going to work maybe just a hair differently. Mine is a little more paint by numbers, okay? So it will give you, it shows you right on here the guides, and I guess if I flip this open up, you'll see, I mean, maybe see how it's got some numbers and it has some arrows that's going to point to it, and it continues that on the front side as well. So making sure we go through those thread guides and through the thread take up.
Now, one of the things I always told my kids at school to make sure your take-up lever is at its highest position. That's like putting your car in neutral. You can pull your thread through there and it's loose. You can bring it around so that you can put the thread, after you thread your needle, you can go from the front to the back of your presser foot. If your if your take-up lever is down at the bottom, it doesn't allow you to do that. Also, if your presser foot is down, that's another indication your thread won't go through. It holds it for to the feed dogs, and it won't allow your thread to go through. So if your thread is not nice and loose in there to move freely through, put your presser foot up, put your take-up lever at the top, and then you should be able to move those threads.
Okay, so the last thing that we get to do when this is all said and done is the sewing machine test. And with that is simply just take a piece of scrap fabric, you're going to put it through the machine and make sure that it sews well, that it looks nice, and then from there that's where we can start playing with some of the other pieces on our sewing machine in terms of those tensions and really adjusting it to get what we need done for the material that we are going to use for the thread and for the thread that we're using and the material we're using. And with that, that is the very quick version of how to clean your sewing machine. We hope that all of you are enjoying sewing and working on some of these projects, and we hope that you would join us again on another edition of Extension Ed Talks.